Okay, fantastic. So again, thank you for attending. I'm really happy to see you here, and I'm going to share my screen so we'll get started. Okay, super. As I said, this is Engaging Multilingual Learner Newcomers. It's a PLC, and it's meant to go hand in hand with the WIDA's e-learning course entitled Engaging Multilingual Newcomers. So if you haven't enrolled in that course, please feel free to do so. You're certainly welcome here. If you're not able to do that, I think hand in hand, you would get a lot out of it, but I've definitely condensed the information there and added some additional information. So I think it will be, hopefully will benefit you either way. If you need information about how to enroll in that course, feel free to ask me that about that in the chat, or feel free to email me separately, and I can help walk you through that. As I said, this is session 1 of 3, so we'll get started today on social and emotional supports for multilingual newcomers. Oh, it doesn't want to forward. There we go. So to overview, my goals for today are to share and clarify some common terminology related to ESOL and multilingual newcomers, to look at social and emotional practices that support engagement for multilingual newcomers and their families, to look at practices for gathering information about students and creating assets-based student portraits. We'll also look at acculturation and practices that support students through the acculturation process. So first, we're going to start with some key terminology, and I am guessing a lot of you will be very familiar with these terms, but I'm going to look at them each for just a moment. I'll first start with a note on terminology. The state of Maine has just adopted multilingual learners rather than English learners. Up until late in the year last year, we used the term English learners to refer to students who are not yet proficient in English. Now we are referring to them as multilingual learners. We choose to use this assets-based terminology to emphasize the strengths and skills students bring to school, as well as the importance of supporting the development of all languages. So multilingual learners who are in the process of acquiring English participate in English for Speakers of Other Language, or ESOL programs. Oopsie daisies, having trouble with my forwarding today. There we go. So multilingual newcomers are students who are recent arrivals to the United States and are called multilingual newcomers. The term recent describes an arrival range between 6 months and up to 2 years. Important characteristics of multilingual newcomers include being new to the US school culture and the English language. In this presentation, we talk a lot about family, and in this case, family refers to parents or guardians, siblings, extended family members, close family friends, and other adults who contribute in significant ways to the children's development and education. In this presentation, acculturation describes the process of how families and individuals navigate the social and psychological changes associated with contact, conflict, and adaptation between 2 or more cultural groups. It's important to note that individuals, families, and communities go through a variety of phases and use a variety of strategies as they choose how they will engage with the new culture. Trauma, a response to a stressful experience in which the person's capacity to cope is undetermined. Examples of traumatic events are war, natural disaster, food insecurity, family separation, loss of a family member, fleeing danger, or persecution. Now we'll talk a little bit about who are our newcomers. Newcomer is a comprehensive term for a recently arrived immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker, or asylee. A newcomer student is a recently arrived student in grades K through 12 who may not yet be proficient in English and may or may not have received a formal education in their country of nationality or any other country during their immigration journey to the United States. And I like this quote at the bottom: being in school is where children should be. It's safe. People take care of you. You learn things. And it's where you go to have a good future. And that's from a new Mainer, 12th grader, Iraqi refugee. So in more detail, who are our newcomers? An asylee or asylum seeker is a person who is forced to flee his or her country of nationality because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, and is already present in the United States or is seeking admission at a port of entry. Here's another good quote from a student. I was scared to be at school because I didn't know what it was. Now I'm happy. A refugee is a person outside his or her country of nationality who is unable or unwilling to return to his or her country because of nationality, because of persecution, or a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And another student, when I walk down the hall, the teachers look at me as if I'm not there. And I have these student quotes just to personalize it and to just walk us through the different experiences that our students are having as we are trying to engage them in our classrooms. Another group of newcomers could be a student who is identified as having limited or interrupted formal education, or an acronym we often use is SLIFE. So they may have had limited or interrupted schooling in their native country, and as a result, may have limited literacy in reading and writing in his or her primary language, and is behind grade level in academics and learning to learn skills. So in other words, they may need support and assistance in learning how to be a student. The reasons for interruptions in schooling could be a variety of things, including poverty, geographic isolation, lack of transportation, expectations for school attendance, work responsibilities, natural disasters, war, community violence, and persecution. I want to pause here and say that if any of you have questions that you really want to capture in the moment, feel free to unmute and interrupt me. Our group is small enough to do that. Otherwise, if you have a question that you want to leave for later, feel free to add it to the chat. So another category of newcomers are an unaccompanied minor. It could be that the student is a refugee, asylum seeker, or asylee under the age of 18 who is separated from both parents and is not being cared for by a guardian or another adult who by law or custom is required to do so. Okay, so here I've listed key elements of engagement, and we're going to talk about several of these today, and then the remainder I'll look at in weeks 2 and 3. So we have family engagement, knowledge of students, knowledge of the students' community, acculturation and acculturation support, connecting families and schools, developing a shared collegial approach, surfacing student assets, and providing effective instruction. I want to look at the first, of family engagement. Some key elements for family engagement are that it must be ongoing. It must be mutual, meaning it serves and works for both schools and family. It will be built on trust and respect, focused on student learning, student language development, and student achievement. And when working on connecting families and schools, it will take a focused, systematic and sustainable effort. It does take time. It takes consistency and effort. It requires two-way communication so that schools have a way of consistently and effectively reaching out to families, and families have a way of consistently and effectively reaching out to the school and educators. The school will provide interpreters and provide written and text communication in the primary language so that parents consistently have access to meaningful communication from the school. Some key actions that will support family engagement are meeting together with facilitated conversations to learn about culture and also to learn about family life, expectations, and things that families have on their mind. Some schools may have a cultural broker or a language facilitator that supports this. Other schools and districts may need to organize these meetings and facilitated conversations with interpreters that are brought in for these occasions. Schools would initiate and organize home visits and community visits. Some schools will be able to engage a bilingual resource specialist. Again, others will need to bring in interpreters and resource folks from outside in order to provide some of these connecting conversations. One really important action that we as educators can provide to students and families is very clearly sharing the routines for school success. In other words, what items do students need to bring from school? How do systems in school work? For example, how does snack time work? How does lunchtime work? What do students need to have to be prepared for each class? What do students need to have to be prepared for each season? How does the busing system work? So if we can provide very clear communication around those items, it will help families and students to feel safer and understand what is expected sooner rather than just finding it out as they go along. And working on recognizing and respecting the many ways that families support learning, even if it's not the traditional expectations that we may hold for the students that we have had in the past. So here's another nice list, and I'm going to go into this in quite detail, the ABCs of family engagement. So the ABCs of family engagement is a handout that is built right into the WIDA e-learning course that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. If you are able to enroll in that, you will have access to these handouts. I'm going to read some highlights about each one of these items. If you want this handout and you're not able to access it through the course, feel free to email me and I can share it with you as a PDF. We've touched on some of these around ongoing, mutual, and built on trust and respect, and that the engagement with families will be focused on student learning and achievement. So the first one is awareness. And one way to raise awareness is to reflect on one's belief about working with families and one's beliefs about how families should support their children's education. Such beliefs may not be obvious to educators, to us, but they may in fact impact how we approach family engagement. So it's important to reflect on what are we maybe unconsciously expecting of families, and what instead could we look at that we are receiving from families, or that families are making an effort to do and recognize that as effort and engagement on the part of the family to support students. Another way to raise awareness is to reflect on the school or the district's implicit and explicit expectations for family engagement. And to remember that we, in our culture, have traditional expectations that families will comply with. But instead, it will help us if we can broaden our view of what are some non-traditional ways in our culture that our families of newcomers may be engaging with to support their child's learning. Some examples of non-traditional forms of engagement include activities that empower families by equipping them with the knowledge and skills that they need to navigate schools. Advocacy. Advocacy is a tool that parents and educators can use to fight injustices and improve children's educational experiences and trajectories. Advocacy requires a certain knowledge base and skill set. Often families from historically marginalized populations, such as families of language learners, may not have had the opportunity to develop the skills and knowledge needed to advocate within the school's US education system. So we as educators can support parents' advocacy efforts by providing parents with workshops or other learning opportunities that address school system regulations and decision-making process. Such opportunities can help parents feel empowered to seek help if issues or concerns arise. Number 3, brokering. Brokers are people with access to the knowledge, skills, and language of school who serve as mediators to provide families access to the school culture and language. Families that are new to the country can benefit greatly from having access to cultural and language brokers. Cultural brokers not only support families as they learn how to navigate the US school system, they can introduce families to the role parents are expected to play in homeschool relationships, and they can inform families of their rights as parents. Number 4, building trust. Research shows that a lack of trust is often what keeps families from spending time at school. Building trusting relationships is often easier said than done. Teachers receive little training in family engagement strategies, and for a variety of reasons, some parents, especially those from historically marginalized populations, do not feel comfortable walking into school or speaking with a teacher. And trusting relationships can be developed through the evolution of respect, integrity, competence, and personal regard. In other words, there's mutual respect between educators and the families. And educators and families act toward one another with integrity and work together with a sense of competence by recognizing that everyone can contribute toward the common goals of supporting students. And the C's, communication. We've touched on this quite a bit, so I'm not going to read a lot of my notes on this, but I will just say that even with the best communication, misunderstandings may still arise for a number of reasons, including the quality of the translation or interpreting services and culturally specific content that requires familiarity with schools to interpret and understand. So it's best, as you're using an interpreter or a translating service, to check in with parents, find out if they have questions, ensure that they're understanding the information, to use parent-friendly language when communicating, both orally and in writing with families. And the last ABC of engagement is connecting to learning. Connecting family engagement to what students are learning in school. Again, it calls for focused and systematic, sustainable approaches. If the purpose of engaging with families is to help them support learning at home, then educators must have the time and resources available to provide families with frequent and comprehensible information on the curriculum and student progress, instructional strategies, and any assessment information that parents will need to know. Giving parents access to such information paves the way for developing a partnership. So now we're going to move on to a little more detail about getting to know your students, understanding the community that they are living within, and building a knowledge of the students' assets. So effective instruction starts with knowing your students and families. And I like this quote: when you figure out the community you serve, you figure out the biography of your students. So we're going to start with thinking about culture. And I'm actually going to change the way I'm displaying my screen for a moment. Okay. I wanted to see everybody. See how we're doing. Are we doing okay? Anything that I should stop and address at this moment? Okay. Everyone's feeling good? Okay, I'm going to keep going. In a short time, we're going to try some breakout rooms and see how that goes. So just emotionally prepare for that moment. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so we're going to talk about what is culture. And we're going to start the screen show again. See how it likes to do this. It likes it fine. So at this moment, I'm going to ask you to take 3 minutes and write down all of the words that come to mind when you think about what culture means to you. And I'm actually just going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to just time you for 2 minutes. And at that point, we'll come back together and I will divide you into breakout rooms and we'll talk about this list with a specific prompt. So go ahead and write down all the words you can think of when you think about what culture means to you. Just about 30 seconds remaining on those 2 minutes. Okay, that's the timer. Thank you so much for taking time to do that. Our next slide is going to give you the prompt for your breakout room discussion. So in the breakout room, I'm going to ask you together to sort your list into cultural aspects that are visible, less visible, and not visible. And then when we come back together, I'm going to ask you to do a short bit of sharing. And then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And one of the questions is, what do you think you already know about your students from this list? And the second question will be, what do you think your students want you to know from this list that perhaps you don't know yet? So in the breakout room, we'll talk about this categorizing. And then if you have time and you want to, you can start to reflect together about what do you already know about your students, maybe what's easy to identify based on what you already know, and what will your students want you to know as time goes on. Okay, I'm gonna do this again. Let's see what happens. Let's see, there's 16 of you. So let's do, how about 4 rooms? That sounds good. Okay, I will bring you back together in about, what do we want? Do we want 5 minutes or do we want 4 minutes? Let's do 4 minutes. 6 minutes. Amy wants 6 minutes. 6 minutes. We can do it. Okay, sounds good. 6 minutes. See you then.
Hello.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Welcome.
I was having microphone issues and I was in one of the groups. I had to get off, so I'm hoping I can get back in somehow.
Okay, do you remember any of the names of the folks you were joined with?
Yes, because one of them, I think it was Sarah Robinson.
Okay, sure. Let me check which one that is. Yeah, room 3. I think I can do that for you.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to help.
Oh,
There you go.
thank you.
Yeah. There you go.
Is being recorded.
Welcome back. Thank you. How did it go? Good conversations. Super. Okay, well, a lot of you are unmuted. That's great. Feel free to unmute if you'd like to share. Would one person from each group or more than one be willing to share a little bit of your conversation, both about what you found in each category and the answers to the questions, at least for you? What did you already know about your students from these lists? And what do you think your students want or need you to know going forward? Just unmute and jump in if you feel like you're ready to share.
I'll jump in. It was so fast, but I will say that I think that our group was in agreement that we all recognize that most of what we had written down for what culture is not visible, or is at least less visible.
Mm-hmm. Could you give some examples of what you had in your list or what your group had in the list?
Sure. Beliefs, ways that a person is respected, practices, values, rituals, language. And we didn't write down any that were visible.
Yeah, yes, and I sort of anticipated that because all of you already have a significant background in working with multilingual learners, and you've given this some thought, so you know how deep culture is, and you know the things that are really going to matter to your students are the things that maybe they can't even explain about themselves all the time. That it's stuff that's so deep and so part of just growing up and being in your family and being in your culture, that it takes some self-awareness to even describe some of that or describe how it's different from what they're experiencing now. Would anyone else like to answer the question, what do you already know about your students at this moment? And what do you think your students need you to know or want you to know going forward? No, that's okay. That's fine. These are mostly for self-reflection. And I think we all know that, and the main point of this being the first area that we cover is that if students feel safe and students feel welcomed and students feel known and valued, their stress level, their anxiety level will calm down and they will be able to engage in learning. But if we don't recognize the social and emotional needs of the student, it might take a really long time for them to feel comfortable and able to learn academically and to learn in a new language. So there's this temptation, of course, because there's so much pressure to get things going, to just jump right into language learning and academics, which we need to do. But first, we also need to address the feeling of safety and belonging that everyone needs. So that was the reason for that activity. I also want to say that this is the longest of the 3 sessions, so we may not get to everything today. If we don't, this video and the slideshow will be posted on the Maine DOE website. And I will finish the slideshow presentation if we miss anything when we come together next week. We're not going to just skip anything, but if we don't get to each slide and each piece of information, I will come back to it next week. So let's keep going. We have about 20 minutes, and I want to make sure I leave some time at the end for questions. So I'll share my screen again. And I'm going to leave it like this. I know it's not as nice for you to see, but for the moment, I want to still be able to look at several things at once. So here, you probably are all familiar with this, the cultural iceberg. Those things that are visible, like age, clothing, gender, behaviors, and then the less visible, patterns of speech and body language, talents and family traditions. And then we get down to the deepest level of culture, life experiences, values and beliefs, worldview and assumptions. Some of these I know you had on your list. And it's just, I think it's always refreshing to revisit this and remember how much is in each person and how much is in each family and culture that we interact with. So we are going to watch a short video, and this is going to take, maybe take about 10 minutes. So my thinking is we'll come back together after this and we'll do a question and answer time or just conversation, and then we'll continue with the remaining slides next week, if everyone is okay with that. I know it's 3 to 4 and people have busy schedules, so I don't want to overstay. And let's hope this works well.
Can anyone else hear it? I can't seem to hear it.
I can't hear it.
You can hear it. Okay, thank you. That is interesting information. And I don't know how to fix it in the moment. So we'll just move on and we'll come back to Zaretta next time. And it also will be embedded in the slideshow that's saved to the website. So you can find it there. I don't want to go into a lot of time trying to do technology solutions because there's a lot more we have here that we can cover. So we'll just go back into the slideshow and continue. This is Zaretta's book here. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, it's really interesting and key information about working with students who are culturally diverse and really engaging ourselves in culturally responsive instruction and planning. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is creating student portraits. And this is a big thing that WIDA talks about in a lot of their professional learning right now. I really like this idea because what we're trying to do is capture what students are about as individuals, and of course is part of their experience and what they bring to the learning environment, both individually and culturally. So the purpose of creating a student portrait is to inform our instruction. And we do that by getting to know our students. So we can create things like interviews or questionnaires that we do with students and their families and or families. We can do activities to surface student assets. And these can be activities like icebreakers. And I know that in our in our department and our team that work together, we're always talking about which icebreakers would be good to work with students who may have limited language ability, but could still participate in. If anyone has great ideas for those, feel free to put them in the chat. Something as simple as Me Too, or aligning ourselves in corners with photos of something that represents us, are good activities. Also wonderful activities that allow students to express themselves and tell about themselves are painting, drawing, any kind of arts are a great way to start with students, because even if they're not an artist and they don't feel confident in their artistic ability, they can express themselves. And it really can be quite open-ended, and then students can share with what they want you to know about them. And then, so you take this information and you create a written document for yourself to use as your lesson planning, so you can look back at the student portrait. It can be something as simple as a list, or it can be a paragraph. I, in the past, have done something where I interviewed the student and then I created like almost like a newsletter about the student, which included a picture, the information the student had given me, and then maybe some things that I had learned about them through interacting with them over the weeks and months that I knew them. And you can include things like home language or primary languages, experiences, interests and passions, challenges, and just general background information, what the student has faced for challenges, what the student values, what the student has for goals. And there's a link here. I'm not going to click it at the moment, but it will be here for multilingual learner student portrait examples and ideas. And that comes from the WIDA website, and it will be clickable for you if you go back in to the website and download this presentation. So here, we're going to move on to acculturation. And I'm just going to start this process and we'll return to it next week. I'm seeing that we have about 12 minutes left in our hour, and I'd like to give us at least 8 minutes at the end, so we have some time for discussion. So acculturation, as you all know, is a very broad topic, and this word is used frequently, and we don't often dive into all the aspects and what it means. So some strategies for acculturation, and this comes from a work by Barry. Integration, assimilation, separation, and marginalization. Those are the main strategies that students, families, and communities use as they're looking to interact with the new culture and find their way. Phases that are often seen during these different strategies are euphoria, so excited to be here, loving everything about your new culture; shock, you're not really knowing how to interact with the new culture; and survival mode. These are all different phases that we can expect our students to go through. So acculturation, by definition, is the how and why the how and why students enter a country. It varies as much as the terms used to describe migration experiences and legal status. Some families arrive in the US by being invited for new opportunities, while others are escaping scarring pasts with uncertain futures. Each migration experience impacts how families navigate the social and psychological changes associated with contact, conflict, and adaptation between two or more cultural groups. This whole process is referred to as acculturation. Acculturation is not a linear process. Individuals and communities are able to move between the different strategies and experiences along their acculturation process. Educators can be of great support by recognizing and supporting the different strategies, supporting social and emotional well-being in the classroom, and through connecting to students' families and communities. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the strategies for acculturation that individuals, groups, and communities may employ. And they might employ one all, or a combination of these strategies over time. So assimilation is prioritizing seeking acceptance in the dominant cultural group over conserving one's culture. Separation is avoiding interactions with the dominant cultural group in order to conserve one's own culture. Integration is conserving one's culture while seeking acceptance, in the dominant cultural group. Marginalization is isolating one's culture as a result of the dominant cultural group resisting integration and assimilation attempts. Individuals' respective acculturation strategy can differ between their private and public life spheres. For instance, an individual may reject the values and norms of the dominant culture in their private life, which would be separation, whereas they might adapt to the new dominant culture in the public parts of their life, and it may look like integration or assimilation. Some questions to reflect on. When might you have experienced or witnessed these acculturation strategies or phases? How might these strategies or phases manifest themselves in a school setting? Some strategies to support acculturation are nonverbal communication, simply a smile or friendly gesture. Ensure that communication is happening effectively through translators and interpreters. Making home and community visits. Learning key phrases in the primary or home language of your students. Create a safe environment by establishing consistent routines and expectations. I want to especially remark on creating consistent routines for entering the classroom or entering the school day and exiting the school day. This can help students really lower their stress level and their anxiety level so they know what to expect as they enter and exit. Ask for help to meet students' intersecting challenges. Students are best served by a team approach. Often ESOL teachers or classroom teachers handle a lot of the student needs on their own, but in the case of newcomers, it may be best to pull in a quite diverse team of school and community helpers. And then increase your own self-awareness through activities which provide opportunities. This is a lot of reading I'm doing. Increase self-awareness for students so that they learn how to name and express their feelings in a way that they can share with you. And I'm going to stop there because we want to be able to come back to this. So we have about, well, we're down to 6 minutes, but I wanted to give everyone a chance to ask some questions. And I see, Laura, you asked, what is the website again? So the website it's the Maine Department of Education, and it's the Multilingual Learner Office. So if you go to maine.gov, you will have some choices. And if you choose the tab that is under, I think it's under instruction, and you'll want to choose the tab under that's multilingual learners. I'm going to put my contact information right here in the chat for everyone. So if you get lost searching for that, or if you just really want to connect with me for specifics, you're very welcome to contact me anytime. My whole role here at the Maine DOE is to offer professional learning and support for those of you who are working with multilingual newcomers in your setting. So I'm largely available to answer questions if you would like to meet one-on-one or in a group. We're available for that, so don't hesitate to reach out. At this point, I'm going to stop the recording. Yes.